Hi, guys. Today we're going to talk about two of my favorite things, bread and business. I have Martin Sorge, winner of the Great American Baking Show and the author of Great Bakes newsletter on Substack, and also the forthcoming Great Bakes cookbook. As you might have heard me say a million times, I am a bit of a nervous baker. And homemade bread, truly, I've never even tried my hand at it. But whether you have never kneaded dough like me, or you're a passionate baker who is curious about German bread and Midwestern flavors and food, I know you are going to enjoy this episode. But one of the reasons I'm most excited to talk to Martin is we are kind of kindred spirits when it comes to how we approach the business of food writing and cookbooks. And I wanted to share his story because it applies to anyone who considers themselves a lifelong student or who wants to take a financially sound leap in a creative career. So maybe press pause to make a cup of tea and toast a thick slice of bread and slather it with butter, because we are going to settle in and chat with Martin Sorge.
This could happen to you. This could happen to you. This could happen to you.
I wanted to take a moment to tell you about the Not From Concentrate newsletter on Substack. Subscribe for free to stay up to date on new episodes and get access to giveaways and bonus content. I also want to give a special shout out to my paid subscribers who get new, wildly delicious and distraction-proof recipes delivered to their inboxes every month, as well as essays and tips for cooking with a busy brain. Plus, paid subscribers get access to my full recipe archive. Head to catherinesmart.com to become a free or paid subscriber, and thank you for supporting the show. Martin Sorge, welcome to Not From Concentrate.
Thanks for having me, Catherine.
I'm so excited to chat with you. I first heard of you not because of your, fame from the Great American Baking Show or even your Substack newsletter, Great Bakes, which I love, but because you were on the Everything Cookbooks podcast, which I am a huge fan of, and I know you are as well. And I, at the time, was like cooking for a personal chef client, and I'm listening to you, and I'm just like, this guy and I are kindred, and he's such a hustler, and I'm loving everything he's saying. So I really am just so excited to chat with you about baking and your upcoming book and everything. But could you maybe start by just sharing a little bit about kind of your background and how you came to be in this baking space?
Yeah, the winding, luck-filled path that got me here. So I've definitely always been, and I kind of hate to use this term, but like a foodie. Like my parents really liked good food, but in like the least pretentious way possible. I'm very Midwestern. So I learned like how to, find the best sweet corn. My mom would go to the farm stand and we never got it the first few weeks it was out because she said it's not going to be good yet. And then she would check if it was good by literally just peeling back the husk and taking a bite and saying, okay, yeah, we can get a dozen of these ears. They're good. So that's the kind of foodiness that I grew up in. And we avoided chain restaurants, went to the local ones, went to the butcher shop when that was sort of dying out in the 90s. So I always loved food and was really into it. But it was always just kind of a side hobby a little bit. And then I had an English degree, and that didn't really do a lot because writing is tough. And so I went back to school to study public policy and economic development because I really wanted to make a difference in my community. And so I spent my career really working to support small businesses in neighborhoods and cities and around the country. So that's what I spent a lot of time doing. But in the background, I was always cooking and baking became sort of my therapy because I was working on big picture issues that required, there was never an easy answer. It required a committee or a lot of community engagement to figure out how we can, have a thriving neighborhood. Or I worked for the city of Chicago and how can we fix these big, intractable, long-term problems? And baking was a way for me to come home and do something by myself from start to finish. And look, I'm done. This thing is done. It's finished and I love it. And I just kept doing that. And then I auditioned for the Great American Baking Show because it was one of my favorite shows along with the British version. And somehow they took an interest in me and I got cast on the show and sent over to England to film it. And I never thought I would win the show, but when I did, I thought, okay, now's a chance that if I ever wanted to do some food writing, which is my passion, I don't want to open a bakery. I don't want to sell my baked goods, but I really love writing and thinking about food. So I said, if there's ever a time to do it, now is the time. So that's when I kind of put a lot of energy into that, into the writing, into working on a cookbook proposal. And then that's kind of where I am today.
Let's start with your baking and kind of what is your style of baking? How do you approach it? I know you're a self-proclaimed like bread nerd. You're going for a bread sommelier, I heard. So maybe let's start with, how you approach baking, and then I really want to hear about this bread sommelier program.
I approach baking like a lot of people approach cooking with like what is inspiring me these days, like what ingredients are great. But then I, especially in the past couple of years after, building showstoppers on TV, I really pared my baking down into what is the best technique that is both the easiest but also gets the best results. So that kind of balance, and it's not the ultimate, absolutely perfect way to make something, but something that is easy and straightforward, but still gives you something with the perfect texture and most delicious result. Even if that might mean putting in some weird ingredients, and by weird I mean a whole grain flour that I love, or a unique herb, or a really specific variety of fruit. So I think that's my style, is really kind of wholesome, very Midwestern, because that's where I grew up. We really celebrate the seasons here. And yeah, I especially like to use a lot of different grains in my baking, because I feel like that's an underutilized flavor component, especially for kind of your average home baker. They might not think outside of all-purpose flour. And we're in the Midwest here, where a lot of our beautiful grains are grown.
I don't think we hear that much about Midwestern cooking. It's just like an underrepresented topic in food writing. What is Midwestern cooking to you? How would you pitch it?
A lot of folks have told me, I talked to a person in the publishing industry who said, "Oh, Midwestern, that's so niche." And I said, "That's a big chunk of the country." So I think that's something I always like to remind people. So I said, remember, it's a big chunk of the country, but I think of it, it's America's heartland. It's the bread basket. Michigan has the second most diverse agricultural economy in the country, second to California. So we have a lot of good stuff going here, but I think it's just being a little more humble about our bakes, being honest about what we're craving and not necessarily always chasing trends. But the Midwest is also like just as diverse and has a unique heritage. My approach to Midwestern baking is really focused on like what grows here, but also my German heritage, which I've recently been tapping into a little bit more, because a lot of the Midwest has a long history of German heritage, and there's some really delicious baking that goes along with that, some that we still bake today and some that's been maybe a little bit forgotten. So that's my approach to Midwestern baking, but I think it's really that humble America's bread basket piece of it that I just love, because I love Midwestern people most of all.
That's awesome. And I love that it is also like adding a little bit of refinement. I think there's a really unfair stereotype of like it's a bunch of cans in a casserole, and that's as you point out, like that's absolutely not the extent of it. And so I think that's really great that you're adding this sort of like elevated showcasing the grains and all of that. And yes, the people are so my high school boyfriend went to Lake Superior State University, which is, talk about niche if you're from New Hampshire. And what I remember is his friends from Traverse City were so nice. The lake was so beautiful, and it was the coldest I've ever been in my entire life. Like, I remember stepping outside and thinking like every bit of water in my body just froze instantly. Absolutely so cold.
Yeah, every year I'm like, why? It's so cold. But then we spend some of our time up near Traverse City as well. And we're like, but it's also so wonderful to be like quiet, snuggled up in the snow.
Yes, and so beautiful. Well, I am excited to try some more of the recipes from your newsletter, Great Bakes. Can you talk a little bit about your newsletter, how it got started, what people might find there?
So Great Bakes, I started right after the season of the Great American Baking Show that I was on aired, because people just kept asking me for recipes. And I was like, oh, I don't really have a website. What's the best way to do this? And then I realized I read a lot of these great newsletters. So why don't I start one? And I just shared things starting with seasonal bakes that I really love. I didn't have a blog before. I didn't have any experience writing a recipe. So it was also one way for me to really practice. And the folks who tested my recipes for me said, these are really great. So it's really things that I think are seasonal or unique or something that's exciting me that I put up there. Try to get 2 recipes out a month these days. While working on a cookbook, it's hard to churn out recipes.
It's so hard. I had to pare down the expectations for my readers. I was like, right now, I love you so much. There's a great archive. You're going to get 1 a month because I'm sorry, I can't. So much recipe development.
As did I. And I switch it up. Sometimes it's a bake. I really like to do preserving. So I have a marmalade recipe coming up. And it's really just things that I'm feeling like need to come out right now, especially bakes that are easy. And it's also a fun place for me to put bakes that might be a little more niche versus things in my cookbook, which are super classic, or things I'll write for the Chicago Tribune. They might have a funky ingredient or something that I say, hey, I love this bake. You have to go out and find a quince and poach it. But I think this is great. So go for it.
So let's talk about this cookbook. When does it come out? What can you tell us about it? I know you handed in the manuscript. So where are you at on the whole cookbook journey?
So the cookbook, which will have the same name as my Substack, Great Bakes, should be out this August. We are currently in the design phase as we're speaking right now. Hopefully I will see a draft cover this week, so it's very exciting. And I'm reaching out to folks to get blurbs and to read early versions of the manuscript right now. So it's done. Everything's photographed. It feels like the big lift on my end is done. And now it's the exciting part to start seeing it actually come together and look like an actual book, which is wild to me.
So exciting. Congratulations. When I heard your interview, you had kind of just turned in the manuscript. So now you've gone through the editing process. I think listeners will be curious, and I, of course, selfishly am always trying to get cookbook insight from folks as I'm working on my own. What was the editing process like for you?
It was really, I like being edited. I like editors with strong opinions, and I was really happy that my editors didn't have any huge big picture changes to make. I did turn in a very long manuscript because I see the book as it's a book. It's not a newsletter post. It's not an article in a newspaper. So I can explain the why behind things a little more, or I always have a tip. Like, here's the type of apples you should choose. Here's why buttermilk works better than milk and lemon juice in this recipe. So I included all of those little things thinking, hey, we can take them out if we wanted to. And then I put in a lot of stories as well, because again, it's a book. I sit down and read cookbooks cover to cover. And when they have stories and science and some of those other tips, that's what I take out of a lot of books, even if I maybe don't cook the recipes. So I put all of those in there, and we didn't have to take a lot out. I got a lot of great edits to the recipes themselves to help them be a little tighter and a little more consistent, because I do try to be a little creative in my recipe method writing. I don't want it to just be really dry and boring. I want it to be fun to read and have a few little like winks and nods and maybe some sass in there. And I was really happy they kept a lot of it in there. If I would go back and do it again, I would, in a dream world, write the whole book and then completely rewrite it again to tighten things up and make some changes. So it's funny, as a first-time writer, you're reminded like, oh, I need to not overuse certain words that are your crutch words that you use a lot. And it's like, okay, take out that word. It's not doing anything here. And especially as a former English major, I'm like, nope, I don't need this word. In the 100 times I use it in this book, I'm going to take out 90% of them. So that's what I would go back and do again, is like take some time and reread the whole thing and do that work of what phrases maybe have you overused, or what's an adjective you clearly like to use, and dig deep into your vocabulary.
One of my favorite things about listening to your story and kind of following along is you're such an enthusiastic student. You're like, I love being edited. You know, I'm going to tighten this up. I wish I could write it again. And I find it just really inspiring, because it's not It's not easy. And also, at the risk of sounding like such a crabby old millennial, like we do see so much of the influencer, like you have a platform, cool, that's all you need. We will put together the rest with like ghostwriters and scotch tape and like whatever we need to do. And so it's really heartening in a time when we're seeing a lot of like, food institutional media kind of not be as strong, to see somebody like you being like taking the craft so seriously and taking being a good, serious food writer so seriously, and then also figuring out a way to do it. It's really inspiring to see, you had a full-time job when you started this. Could you talk a little bit about that and how you balanced pursuing this dream and passion while also being really open about like, hey, I had a full-time job. You got to pay the bills. This is not necessarily doing it at the moment.
Nope. I worked full time, for a long time, 15 so years in a completely other field. And then as I started working on my book proposal, which I started working on before the Great American Baking Show even came out, because I knew I wanted it to be ready when the show came out. Because again, you have a very, very limited window of time to get your foot in the door, as I like to say. And so I worked on that, and it was really a lot of work because you're baking after hours, writing. But that was the fun part because it was different from what I was doing during the day. But there came to be a point when I realized if I want to do this, I need to spend a little more time doing it. And so I actually transitioned from my full-time job into consulting so I could do some of my former work part-time and put a little more energy into this, because I knew, hey, if I'm going to be serious about it, it's going to take a little bit more time. So I left my job, started doing some more consulting on the time, because to be honest, food writing, and because of the state of media these days, it doesn't really pay the bills unless you're already super famous. And I'm, again, lucky that my spouse has a good job and we could take that risk, which some people don't like to talk about the finances behind things, but I think it's really important to kind of lift the curtain that it's not necessarily the most lucrative gig, even writing a cookbook.
Amen. I always say, like, when I haven't heard it as much lately, but I always say when younger folks come to me and are like, how do you do it? When I used to be on a TV show and I was writing, I was like, yes. And I've always had private chef clients. Like, even when it looked like it was my full-time job, I was private chefing for other folks to pay the bills. So I really appreciate, your transparency about it.
And then I also thought of it as, like I said on Everything Cookbooks, you do have business startup costs, and part of that is your time, that you're not paying yourself for the work you're doing. And so I thought of that, hey, I need to spend some time on these startup costs, which that means getting your name out there, writing articles that maybe you're slightly underpaid to write, based on the amount of time and ingredients that it costs to write a recipe. But that's part of the cost to build your brand, build your skill, build your network of folks that you know. And that's what all businesses have to do. So you have to think a little bit as a business. Yes, it's my creative outlet. I also think of it as my art that I do. But it is a business. So I have to think about it in that way. And, I worked with restaurant owners and retail shop owners, and they'll put their life savings into opening a restaurant. So why can't I put some of my own money that I've saved or that I'm earning by doing another job on the side into this passion that I have? Yeah, so that's how I approached it, which isn't easy to do. And I was lucky that I was in a position to do that.
I love it. I'm kind of taking a similar path. And I also think it's just interesting, even for folks not in food, but maybe are thinking about pursuing something on the side. So I was in food media for a long time, private chefing. Then I went on to have a food startup. Had I had this opportunity to write a cookbook prior to running and then winding down a startup, I would have not had the business chops to think about it in the way that I do, in the way that you're talking about it. So I think sometimes it can feel like, oh, maybe I'm too late. Maybe I'm unable to do this now. But I think from a financial perspective, from a knowledge perspective, you're a living example of how it can be so beneficial to have that prior career experience, maybe not in the creative passion that you're attempting now. How do you think about your prior career and how it supports and informs the choices that you're making now to make kind of the most of this moment and opportunity?
Oh, it definitely helps a ton. First of all, having worked in a professional environment, then you you approach this career as like, this is a job. I have to, I have a checklist of things I need to get done. I have goals that I have set. I have deadlines that I have to meet, or I have to set myself some deadlines to meet. I'm used to working with a lot of other people to advise me. So I've talked to people to give me advice, whether it's other cookbook authors I've been connected to, other friends who do photography or graphic design. So I surround myself with a sort of brain trust to help me get through things. And other people like you who are in the same boat, who sometimes you just need a support call that says, how's it going for you? I'm struggling with this thing. How's your book going? So that's helped a lot, but also to think of the bottom line a little bit, thinking of, I am also managing my cookbook process. So working on the photo shoot, thinking, okay, I'm going to have to think of the best way to do this photo shoot. Okay, I know that I don't want to shoot all the recipes in one 10-day sprint of photography, because with baking, that's really hard. So I'm going to break it up into 2 photo shoots. I need to write, like, what do I think I'm going to shoot on which day? What can I prep ahead? All those logistics, because I'm on a budget and I can't hire somebody else to do that for me. So what are the ways that I can structure my world around that? And similar as I'm thinking of book promotion, who are the people I know? What is the best value in terms of me going on tour? What's going to maybe cost a little bit less? And how can I guarantee that it's going to be worth it for me if I'm going to fly somewhere, I'm going to drive 6 hours somewhere? How can I make it worth my time? So those are all the things I'm thinking about. And then I spent so many years talking with small business owners and understanding some of their struggles that I think some of them I've even just internalized, like that thing of having your team behind you, whether that's your photographer and your designer and your stylist, but also that brain trust team. That's the thing I would always tell small business owners is, you don't be a hero. Don't do this alone. No one runs a business by themselves. They shouldn't. They have to have people, whether it's you're opening a physical store and you're like, I need an attorney, I need a architect, I need a marketing person, I need other advisors to actually, I need an accountant, I need all those people to actually help my business run. So nobody's doing it alone. So I like to think about it as a team also. We all need a team.
And now that we've gone to Martin's business school, which I'm going to probably make my husband listen to this clip to be like, see, I'm not crazy. Now we've gone to Martin's business school, let's go back to Martin's baking school, because as I've said so many times on this podcast and in my life, I am a very hesitant baker. I have a huge sweet tooth. I love a good loaf of crusty bread. I think maybe I could even be a sommelier. Probably not. But, I can evaluate bread, but I can't bake it. In my mind, I heard you say, I bet if I actually measure things, I can bake. And I was like, wow, I wonder if I actually measure things, if I could bake. So can you speak to a nervous baker like myself, somebody who maybe is a fly by the seat of their pants cook? How might we approach baking in the Martin sort of fashion with measuring things? And where do we start?
So I have been there. That's the first thing I tell people. Like, I was that person who loved to cook, but really rarely followed a recipe to a T. And I made lots of mistakes. But one day I said, I bet if I actually measure the ingredients and follow the recipe that somebody worked on and had tested, I bet I can do this. And I was right. The first tip I always tell people is get a scale. It makes measuring easier, faster, and with less cleanup. That's like number one, is get a kitchen scale and start with like a simple, no-knead crusty bread. It is flour, water, yeast, salt. If you mess up, you're out $1, maybe, worth of ingredients. And the deliciousness that comes from those simple ingredients and this like smell coming out of your oven you can impress anyone with just the simplest loaf of crusty bread. And then just work your way up from there. Like I started baking bread, which I realize is strange because I have a lot of friends who are accomplished bakers and can make cookies and gingerbread houses. And then I tell them to make bread and they look scared about yeast. So I'm like, no, it's not that hard. And it's not going to be perfect the first time. So I really think it's just starting really simple and just doing it a bunch of times. You'll eventually get it. But also, find a good recipe. These days with social media too, like you can ask people questions if you don't understand something or if something goes wrong, like I'm there. Catherine, if you ever make a loaf of bread and have a question, just let me know.
Wait, actually, I want to go back for a second. And this is like, my mom is like a great baker. So this is like particularly shameful. But let's go back to the yeast. Because like, I'm scared of the yeast. So tell me, what are we doing to make friends with the yeast?
You know, the yeast is like your helper there. And think of it as like a fun creature that's in your kitchen that's going to do the work of making your bread rise. So think of it as like a fun creature you have to like go check in on. Like when I go visit my cats during the day, I'm like, oh, how you guys doing? It's kind of like that. So think of it as like a fun creature who's there to help you. So first of all, I always say use instant yeast. Don't use active dry yeast. Just, it works better. You can get a big pack for like $5. Keep it in your freezer. You can use from your freezer and it'll last for years.
Wow. Okay.
And the variables in bread is really mostly temperature and how much yeast you use. So if the bread hasn't doubled and a recipe says let it sit for an hour until doubled, and you're like, it's been an hour, but it has not doubled, then rely on that double. Like wait longer because maybe it's the middle of winter and you're in northern Michigan and your house is cold. So rely on those visual cues first. And it's a lot about feel, which I think is fun because with like cookies and cakes, you don't touch them as much, but you can poke your bread. You can be like, oh, this feels like it's like an airy little pillow. I think it's time to bake. And you'll really get that feel of, oh, the yeast has done its job. Like, oh, this yeast is really happy and nice and active and fluffy. And you'll get it from feeling it, which is really fun as somebody who I love to touch dough. I tell people.
That makes me want to bake and feel more comfortable because that's actually what's scariest to me about baking is like, you pop it in the oven and you pray on it. And you're like, I hope that was right. And as a cook, I'm so used to like tasting and looking and smelling. Do I need to turn up the heat? Do I need another pinch of salt? So that actually makes bread less scary because sure, once it's in the oven, it's on its own. But the fact that you can kind of hang out with it and check that it's ready before you put it in there is reassuring, I think.
Exactly. I find bread less scary than cake because cake, you mix it up and you're like, I hope it rises. And bread, you're like, oh, I know it's already like on its way, so I'm going to put you in there for the home stretch.
And if we're looking at your wonderful newsletter, and maybe we can borrow one for my newsletter, is there a bread that you would recommend we start with?
Ooh, absolutely. My most recent newsletter, I posted this no-knead whole wheat loaf recipe that is sort of my new obsession. I actually learned to bake this in Germany when I was taking a bread sommelier class, or I learned this technique when I was there, where it's a no-knead bread, but it's not an overnight one, and it uses 100% whole grain, which some bakers, even experienced bread bakers, are like, oh, it's not going to be the right texture, or it's going to be harder to knead. You literally just stir the ingredients together, wait, stir them again, put it in a pan, let it rise, and bake it. It is so easy that it's almost frustrating for somebody who is like used to kneading dough and having this complicated way to make your whole grain breads turn out fluffy. It's so delicious. It's so hearty. It has this like really grainy flavor, and I put lots of pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds in it, so it feels healthy. And it doesn't take much time. You can do it in an evening after work with almost no effort, and you don't need any machinery.
Yum. And what are we how are we serving this bread? How do you eat it?
The first couple days, I just love a slice of it with, butter and bread is one of the best foods on the planet. But I love the German idea of Abendbrot, which is like evening bread. So instead of worrying about what you're going to have for dinner, a lot of times in Germany, you have a cold dinner that is just slices of good bread with toppings. So just get it, make a couple slices, put whatever you have in the house on it, whether that's some leftover nice cheese that you have sitting in the fridge, some prosciutto, some lunch meat, some tinned fish, some hummus, whatever you have in there, just a few slices of that, maybe some slices of cucumber, some sauerkraut would be a perfect accompaniment. And then you have yourself like this really comforting, easy to put together dinner without even turning on your stove.
That sounds like your next book. It's like Martin's German girl dinner, but
Exactly, yes. It's a great way to think about dinner because, sometimes you come home from work, or if you're, us and you've been cooking all day in the kitchen, developing a recipe, you just want something easy and you don't want to cook anything else.
Yes, and a good loaf of bread. I always say whether you're baking it or buying it, usually in my case, it's such a good investment because it's so precious. Like I will find ways to use it because I'm like, I can't let this incredible loaf of bread go to waste.
Absolutely not. And I like to think of bread as like in Germany, they have these giant loaves of like, they're huge and you can buy like just a quarter of a loaf, but they're beautiful. And I like to sometimes think of like, what if we put bread at the center of the table instead of like a roast?
Ooh, I really like that. I'm going to try it and take pictures and put it on Instagram.
Let's do it.
I think there's a lot of fun styling things that you could do there too. So again, not being a big baker, assuming we're talking to folks who are not big bakers, I want to talk about equipment for a minute. I was reading your most recent newsletter and you were talking about, you're like, it's ridiculous if you don't buy this pan. Like you need this one bread pan, like the Pullman loaf pan. Could you give us a rundown of just kind of like the bare essentials that will really make our life easier if we're thinking that we might want to start dabbling in bread baking?
If you want to start bread baking, I think really you need a bowl, a spoon, a whisk. Most importantly, you need a kitchen scale. Number one, get a scale. And one good loaf pan. The Pullman, kind of the 9-inch Pullman loaf pan is my favorite because it gives you these beautiful straight edges. It's big enough that very few recipes will be too big for that loaf pan. And then a Dutch oven or cast iron combo cooker to make a crusty loaf of bread. That's pretty much all you need to get started. It's really a good place to start without a lot of equipment. You don't need a stand mixer unless you want to do some other kinds of breads. I use my stand mixer to knead dough all the time, but you don't necessarily need it to get a delicious loaf of especially crusty bread. So that's really all you need.
All right. So what you're telling me is there's no excuse, Martin. It's going to cost me like $1 and I already have all the stuff in my kitchen. So I should just try it. This might be the week that I do it. It is cold here in Boston right now. I'm feeling inspired.
The best way to heat up your house is to make some bread.
Oh, it smells so good. We had my former neighbor, Kyle, who owns a wonderful company called Brewers Foods. He makes like crackers and different things with leftover grains from beer brewing, but he's a big baker. And when he lived around the corner, he would always bring bread over, which I loved. My husband loved even more. But I really miss Kyle's bread, and I think I might need to pick up the mantle and bring bread baking back into our home. Okay, well, Martin, I really just have one more sort of piece of this interview, which is we always do the busy brain part of the podcast where we ask 2 questions. The first one is, how do you get inspired to get in the kitchen and get cooking when maybe you're not feeling particularly inspired?
Like I said earlier, I think being in the kitchen actually helps me focus and almost calm my brain. It can be my meditation a little bit because it takes you out of your head and into your body a little bit more. And, you're working with your hands and you have to try to pay attention and not distract yourself. So that there can be times in the day where if I've been writing all day or I've been scattered everywhere, where you're doing, I have this thing to do and then this other thing to do and this other thing to do, you can really like slow down and focus. So there are times when I'm really excited to get in the kitchen and really work on a project and pay attention to it. But you have to do that from a calm place. So you have to take a minute for me, I always start in like, if the dishwasher just ran, I have to empty the dishwasher. I have to clear off the counter. I can't start from a place of kitchen chaos because then I know that whatever I'm making won't turn out as well. So I have to both quiet my brain down as much as possible, quiet my anxiety down, and kind of start from a clean slate.
You just answered my second question without me even having to ask, which is how do you calm the chaos, whether it be physical or mental? And yes, the physical chaos in the kitchen is a real breaking point. And I actually want you to go a step further maybe, because I heard that you were called very organized on the baking show. This was like something you were complimented on. I can't say organization comes naturally to me. I'm working on it. Lastly, do you have any kitchen organization tips for us?
Yes, so it's funny that when I was called organized and clean on the Great American Baking Show, I think my husband probably fell over because he thinks that I am so messy and chaotic, but now he realizes, oh, no, there are moments of chaos, but he's got this. the first thing I do, and actually take a couple steps back. So the most difficult time to quiet my brain down was filming the Great American Baking Show. So you're there, you have cameras and lights and 8 other bakers and sound guys and production crew, and you have to do this thing that you practiced. And so I would always start every episode, every challenge by like breathing deeply and trying as much as possible to quiet my mind down and accept there's a lot of distractions here. I am nervous and anxious, but just try to have a good time and try to enjoy this. And that's, I think, one of the things that got me through that crazy experience, because you're used to baking in your kitchen with just you and maybe your cats or your kids walking around, but all of that chaos is not normal. And so that was really hard. And then my tip for cleaning up is really, again, empty the dishwasher, take things out of the sink and put them back in the dishwasher, clean off your counter, prep your ingredients as much as possible, even if it's just getting the ingredients and setting them on the counter. You don't need to measure them out right away. I don't always get all of my mise en place because I don't want to dirty a million dishes always and putting everything in its little dish. So just get the ingredients out. You know, I live in a small house, so sometimes, that weird ingredient is in my basement somewhere. So get it up from the basement, get the pan you need, and then sit down and just read the recipe all the way through again.
Louder for the folks in the back. Read the recipe all the way through.
I do that with my own recipes where I'm like, I've made this 100 times, I'm fine. And then halfway through, I'm like, oh, nope. There's a reason I wrote, don't forget this thing. So just read it through again before you get started.
Awesome. Well, Martin, thank you so much for coming on. We are all going to subscribe to Great Bakes on Substack. We are going to look for your book. I assume if we subscribe to your newsletter, we'll get a heads up when pre-orders and all of that happen. Is that right?
You'll be tired of hearing about it, and I will just keep on sharing about it. So,
well, Martin, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm excited to try measuring ingredients and actually following your recipes like we talked about and see if I can, in fact, become a bread baker. And I will send you a note when I am tearing into your whole wheat Pullman loaf. I'm sure it's going to be delicious.
Thank you so much for having me, Catherine, and good luck with your book.
And you. Thank you for taking time to be here, and I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Martin. And I hope it inspired you to break out the baking scale, perhaps, and also invest in yourself and take seriously your ability to write a new chapter in your own professional life, if that's something that you've been dreaming of doing. But before we go, I need to ask you for one thing that would mean so much to me in the show. Please go to my website, catherinesmart.com, to keep in touch, subscribe to my newsletter, and follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like this episode, I'd love for you to share it with a bread-loving, busy-brained friend.
This could happen to you.
Not From Concentrate is produced by me, Catherine Smart, with audio and video production by Kevin O'Connell. Allie Miller is our associate producer, and the theme music is by Kylie Daly.